Good. Okay, so Quebec.
Quebec. What I like about Quebec, and particularly Montreal, I love Quebec because of its francophone aspect, the French part, but Montreal is not just French, it's the whole world, all assembled in one city. I just love that. And you walk down the street, or you sit, I often just sit by the sidewalk and just watch the people go by, and it's as though the whole world is going by. So I love that internationality of it.
How does that contribute to your work as an artist?
Well, my work is international also, and I want a certain omnipresence to my work, and so I like stuff from everywhere. I'm speaking about colors, I'm speaking about position on the canvas, I'm speaking about the way things fit together. I like it to keep moving, so it's very appropriate. I lived for many years in a small town in Canada, and it was very nice. I loved it. It was a beautiful place, but it didn't have that omnipresence that Montreal does. So that's the answer, I hope.
We went back to that question. What inspires you? Is that the question you like to be asked?
Well, I'm always interested, everything inspires me, mostly variety. What I like above all is variety, and you can see it in some of these paintings, that there's stuff from many sources, and they're all put together, and they all kind of ignite one another. So that's what I like.
What inspires you the most to look at for a source of?
Well, colors above all. I like colors, and I like the interaction of forms and color, and so it's when things get together and things start to happen. So it's like the internationality of Montreal. I try and get that into my work. Yeah.
This painting behind you. Mm-hmm. What is this? I'm sure you know the painting well. Mm-hmm. Does that reflects the colors, I guess?
Oh, it does, yeah. And there's a lot of different parts of the painting, which I can show you if you want to know, but there's different approaches to different parts of the painting. So part of it is very fussy and very carefully manicured and so on and so forth, and then other parts are just loosey-goosey and you just let yourself go.
What's that mix happen? What happens with that mix of those two elements together?
Well, they stimulate one another. They find they don't relate, but you can make them relate, so that it's like life itself. Sometimes you've got everything planned, and then other times stuff happens out of the blue and you got to go with the flow. So that's what I like, is the challenge of it all.
So it's planning versus spontaneity?
Yeah, that's right. And putting the two together, planning and spontaneity. And planning for spontaneity, if there is such a thing. Yeah.
Do you ever write first before you paint? How do you get an idea for a painting other than observation?
Oh, no, it's visual. I don't write. I could write a book once the painting's finished, but the actual act of it is more, it's like exercise. You're kind of doing different things, it's just different stuff. It's like music in a way. You're playing and so on. There's all these different sounds. You put them all together, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Yeah.
When you were talking, what's your favorite thing to do in Montreal?
Favorite thing to do is bicycle. Bicycling and swimming. I like both those things. And there's plenty of bike paths. Everywhere you go, you can go by bike. And since I moved to Montreal, my car is just gathering dust in the basement, because who wants to drive when you can bicycle? So that's one of my favorite things. The other is I lived here for 6 or something years before I realized that you could swim in the river. So I swim in the river all the time now, especially at this season of the year. I go 3 or 4 times a week and just kind of jump in the river, and then you're just carried along. And a lot of my imagery comes from that swimming in the river, just floating along, letting life take you by, and you just kind of drink it all in.
Let's imagine for a moment that you're in the St. Lawrence River, mm-hmm. and you're floating by the La Frontenac in Quebec City, or just in
Hotel Frontenac.
Maybe, or Montreal, but you're in the water.
Yeah.
Would you give me 30 seconds to a minute of that experience as you're in the water, what you're feeling, because imagine in the documentary you're going to see the sides of St. Lawrence and the river. That's what we're going to show. And I need a kind of poetic experience of being in the water, seeing what's around you as an artist would see it. What do you experience?
Well, what you experience is liberty. You're just floating free. You don't know exactly where you're going. You keep turning in the current. The sky's there, the shore's there, there's people there, there's other boats coming. There's just everything is just going by, and you're just kind of floating through the air. Like, it's like heaven. It's like being in heaven. I'm sure when I'm dead, I'll probably just float around, maybe not in the river, but in the air, and just to have a similar experience, I hope. I'm hoping.
And what else do you experience when you're in the water?
When you cool off, and you see stuff go by, you see buildings go by, and people go by, and bicycles go by, and ducks go by, and so on, and you feel the current pushing you. That's what's really nice, is the current does all the work. You don't even have to be swimming if you don't want. You can just float. So.
And you see the sky differently than when you're in the water?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The sky in a lot of my pictures is painted from my experience in the St. Lawrence River, because you float and you see the clouds and you see the sun come out and then get covered and stuff. So you're drinking in the universe. And that's what I want to get in my paintings, is to get the whole universe into my paintings.
What does that offer us as an audience looking at your paintings, seeing the universe? What does that give us as an experience?
Well, it saves you the trouble of floating in the St. Lawrence, because you can just get the painting and look at it and feel my experience, so I'm sharing it with you. And that's the same is true of most paintings. You're sharing different things with the artist, but it's an artist's way of sharing is to do it visually.
What can you do when you're painting and making art in terms of expression that you cannot do when talking to somebody?
Oh, you can change the subject altogether, you can change the color altogether, you can change the texture altogether, you can change the medium, you can go from brush to comb, you can work with a comb, you can stick stuff on, you can just do anything, as long as it's visual. Painting is the visual world. Yeah.
And how does that stimulate us emotionally, other than words? What does the visuals do for you?
Boy, you get the certain yellow as a I mean, I don't know if I can show you, but no, okay. You get a certain one color together with another color. It just kind of triggers something. It's like eating food, like eating Japanese food, for example. You're not used to Japanese food, and then all of a sudden your nerves are all agitated by these different flavors coming together. And that's essentially what I'm trying to do in my art, is bring different flavors together.
When you walk around downtown Montreal and look at the old city, or Quebec City, what do you see as an artist that you would paint if you did paint it, regardless of whether or not you would or not? If you did, how do you see that imagery? Keep in mind, I'm asking you because I'm showing these buildings, and I'd love to have an artist describe the look of the old buildings such as Notre Dame and those old buildings down there, all of them. Just imagine them with the red signs on the street. Yeah. What does that area mean to you? What do you feel?
Oh, well, I feel the mixture, because you see modern day stuff going by. You see automobiles, for example, which is you've probably never heard of them. It's a recent invention compared to Montreal or compared to Quebec City. You see them going by at the same time as the buildings are going by. So you've got this mixture of history and the present day. So, yeah, and pedestrians.
Is it a French history or a North American?
Well, I like the French aspect, personally. I'm Anglo. I was raised speaking English and so on, but I was always I always wanted to participate in the French world. So that's partly why I moved to France, that's partly why I moved to Quebec City, that's partly why I love living in Montreal, because every 2 minutes you're changing your language. And you can get by perfectly well with just English or perfectly well with just French, but it's not knowing what's coming up next that is exciting for me.
So it's a different sort of era. Is it a romantic feeling being in a French-speaking era? Is it romance or just diversity of language and culture?
Both. It's very romantic. I love switching my brain from one language to another. Unfortunately, I only speak 2 languages, but it's still better than one. Yeah.
So let's switch to the wonderful subject of religion. We've covered with Professor Cornett and all that a lot of religion and faith questions. Do you feel the religion of the history of Quebec has offered you anything since you've been here? The spirit of the Catholic faith or any faith, has it connected to you in any way as an artist? Do you feel a cultural impact in your life? I don't mean going to church and praying. I mean, has there been an effect at all culturally for you?
Well, yes and no. You know, the Quebec was under the reigns of the Catholic Church for a long time, and then it revolted. It ran away from the Catholic Church, and so that what you're seeing here is the remains of the Catholic Church, but it's not a major factor in Quebec life anymore. And it's the same with me. You know, I was very interested in religion when I was young, both Catholic and Protestant and Buddhism and so on. But then you just kind of escape, you get free of it. And you enjoy seeing it, you enjoy the recollections of it, but you're not governed by it.
How about your faith, your sense of need for faith? Does that come through your art, your need for your connection to something greater than you?
Well, life. I like to be connected to life, and for me, life is faith. And you know, whether I'm a Buddhist, whether I'm sitting meditating somewhere, or doing yoga or whatever, it's all to do with life and the perception of the world around us, and the future and the past, all those things. So we're kind of floating through the universe, just like the St. Lawrence River. We're floating through the universe, and things keep changing.
Do you think that continues after our physical body dies?
I would hope so, but I can't guarantee it. I don't have any written statement that says that I will continue to experience these things, but I would like to. Yeah.
Is there anything you would do on the other side? If you found out there was life after death, would you find a way to continue painting, or would you do something different?
Well, I like visual stuff, and I have a certain proximity to visual things, so that would be my first choice. But I also like music, and I like auditory experiences as well, and I also like physical experiences, like running and swimming and bicycling and all that kind of stuff. So those are all things that I would put on a wish list, but I don't know if they let you do that in heaven.